Okay, well, I was recording and it wasn't recording. So I just wanted to take a second to say a few things. I wanted to send a huge thank you guys. I'm so excited. So I'm like a really small YouTuber. I'm just starting out and I expect it to be that way. But just in the past, like, I don't want to say week because really it's been like the last 3 days, I feel like, maybe 4 days. I've literally gained 20 or 25 subscribers, but I'm freaking stoked. I know that quite a few of you actually joined my channel specifically for case and mystery videos, and I really appreciate that. So to anyone who's new, who's watching this, thank you so much. Thank you to anybody who's old too, because you guys have been watching all the rest of my videos since I've been posting them, and I really appreciate that. I just want to welcome everybody who's new because that's a lot of subscribers for me personally. With that being said, lastly, I did get a camera, so I know that being able to see every single pore on my face is really important to a lot of people. So we have this camera now, and I hope that it's great and enjoyable. Unless I have anything pre-filmed on my phone, this is what I'm using now. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Mostly just the thank you to you guys. I put a lot of work into every single video, doesn't matter what I'm doing. I've made videos for a long time, and I love making videos, and so when your work is recognized, you know, really grateful. So I just had to send out a thank you. With that, we're just gonna get into the video because I need to stop talking because this video is not about me. These are real stories and they're real people, and I think that that's really important, and a lot of cases don't get the coverage that they should. So if you can tell anybody about somebody else's case, because a lot of these are still unsolved, and so any person knowing about it that can tell somebody else is a good thing. So I'm hoping what I'm doing here, even as a small YouTuber, is somewhat beneficial. But today we're going to be talking about the Delphi, Indiana murders of 2 young girls, 13-year-old Abigail Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German, and I'm just going to be calling them Abby and Libby now. I wanted to address them by their full names first, just to put that out there so that everybody knows. This is a fairly recent case. So on February 13th, 2017, they were dropped off by a family member around 1:45 p.m. at this abandoned bridge, and you guys should know that Delphi, Indiana is a really small town. I think the population is just under 3,000. I think the place they were dropped off was actually called Monon Bridge, Monon Bridge. I've heard it pronounced different ways, I have no idea. But it was just this abandoned bridge, and it was like an old train track basically that wasn't used anymore. So a lot of people in the town would go there and hike the trails and walk along the bridge. There was a river, I think, called Deer Creek right next to it. The bridge actually went over a part of it. Especially with these girls, they went there a lot and they knew the trails really well, and they just went there to have fun and enjoy themselves. At 2:07 p.m. is when Libby posted a photo, and it was actually of Abby standing on this bridge on the train tracks. And after that, there was another photo that in the background there was a man who looks a little suspicious. It does look like he's trying to keep his face unseen and just look down and not make any sort of eye contact. And then around 5:30 p.m. is when family came to the bridge to pick up the girls, and when they did not arrive in the meeting destination, I guess you could say, they were reported missing. Now, at first, as with a lot of these cases, we run into this a lot where foul play is not suspected, especially with kids. Maybe they just wanted to play a little longer or hiked a trail last minute that took a little bit longer than normal. But as from what I've seen, that kind of behavior never happened with these girls, but they did start searching that evening, but after a couple hours it was called off due to the darkness. But the next morning they resumed searches. You guys, they went all out to try and find these girls that morning. They brought canine units, they brought dive teams, they brought the FBI, everybody was getting involved. I'm sure multiple community members were out there helping search along with the girls' families. The fire department even set up a makeshift command center where they were taking tips to try and find the girls, and they could not issue an Amber Alert for these girls because they didn't fit the criteria. So the criteria for an Amber Alert, if you don't know, they have to be in known imminent danger. They have to have enough information about, like, enough descriptive information so that people know what they're looking for, or law enforcement has to be able to confirm that they were abducted, and they didn't have any of this information other than the fact that they were minors. Unfortunately, that's the way it works, but they were not able to issue an Amber Alert for these girls. Search parties just continued that morning, but unfortunately, both bodies were found around noon on February 14th, 2017, about half a mile away from the bridge where they were last seen.
I'm Riley. I'm with the Indiana State Police. I'm the Public Information Officer from the Lafayette Post.
Steve Mullen, Delphi Police Department, Chief of Police.
Topaz, I'm the Carroll County Sheriff.
Basically, we're going to make this, it's going to be short and sweet. We don't have that much at this point in time. Basically, what we've got, we have found 2 bodies. Is that the Sugar Creek?
Deer Creek.
Deer Creek, sorry. In Deer Creek, about a mile east of town. We are investigating this as a crime scene. We suspect foul play. We have not made positive identification of the 2 bodies, so we're not going to be releasing any information on them at this point in time. We've got the Indiana State Police is assisting the Carroll County Sheriff's Department and the Delphi City Police Department in the investigation here. We also have the FBI Crime Scene Investigation Group here out of Indianapolis. And one thing the family asked us to do is to thank all the communities around Delphi and the people here in Delphi for assisting in attempting to locate these the 2 young children that were missing earlier.
And I want to mention here that the bodies were found right on the property line of a man named Ronald Logan, and there's a clip of him talking about this, so I'm going to enter that here.
Who'd ever think someone would be murdered in your backyard?
Ron Logan has lived on this property in Delphi for more than 50 years.
I don't even recall any homicides in Delphi. I just don't recall any, but a double homicide, this is the first, as far as I know. I don't. But it's just crazy.
He never would have imagined his property would turn into a murder scene.
It's just terrible. I just can't imagine that. My son, when he was a kid, he and his buddies played in here for all the time. I mean, he was born here. That was a different time, though.
Logan and the rest of the community are deeply hurt for the families involved.
According to police, the way the bodies were found indicated homicide, but they weren't sure until the autopsies were completed, and then they knew and had officially confirmed that they were investigating a double homicide. But no information on how the bodies were found or the autopsy results, none of that was released. According to my knowledge, we still don't have answers on any of those questions. Now, the fact that a lot of this information wasn't being released seemed to really upset the community to not have answers and not know what's going on. Even though they were pretty upset about this, the community still came together to try and do what they thought they could. Vigils were held, prayers were said. I believe the middle school the girls attended was originally planning to shut down for a couple days, but they decided to keep it open for the children who were upset about this and needed some counseling and guidance. They provided that to them. They were just trying to do anything that they felt they could, and again, I'm sure that they had a lot of people also participating in the original search parties. So community and police really did come together to do the very best, and we're only in the beginning of this case. I just wanted to acknowledge that because you don't see that in every case, and I think it's important to acknowledge it when you do. There was a lot of people trying to help in any way that they knew how. On February 15th is when they released the photo of the man that I may have already shown you guys, and originally they just wanted to talk to him to probably question him a little bit, but later on February 19th is when they listed him as a suspect in this case. And in order to do that, you have to have pretty substantial evidence to lead you to believe that this person is involved. Otherwise, they'll use terms like possible suspect or person of interest, but to actually have them say that this is officially a suspect in this case, they must have some sort of evidence that we don't really know about. Shockingly, it was stated that the photograph of the man was actually taken from a video that Libby had recorded on her phone. You guys, I'm like getting goosebumps while I talk about it. An audio clip is then played at a press conference, and this audio clip is reportedly also from a video that Libby took on her phone, and this is like the creepiest thing. It is just a couple of seconds long, and it is a male voice saying "down the hill." I'm gonna enter that here. Down the hill, down the hill, down the hill, down the hill, down the hill. I mean, you can clearly tell that that's what this person is saying, and in order to hear somebody speaking at that level, like, he wasn't talking very loud and he was calm, which is another creepy thing. He sounds very calm in the video, but in order for just a phone to pick that up, you would have to be fairly close, so I don't see how this person would be talking to anybody else other than the girls. Both of these, the photo and the audio clip, were claimed to have been taken from it's just like a piece of the video that Libby recorded. We don't have the rest of that video. We don't have any more information. They just released this small clip in hopes that it would help them further along the investigation, and I can understand that, not wanting to release a full video of something that might be personal to the family, could be horrendous. We don't know what is on the video. Police have also recognized Libby as a hero for pulling out her phone in this instance to record, to give them some clues and lead them a little bit closer to getting answers on this case. I did want to throw that out there because I do think it's very smart that that's what she did, but it's also very concerning and disturbing that something spooked her to the point of feeling like she needed to record. Police do not confirm that the voice in the audio clip is the man in the photo. By June 16th, they had over 18,000 tips and still no answers, but about 4 to 5 new tips were coming in every single day. On July 17th, after speaking to people who claimed that they were on the trails the same day as the girls and saw the man in the photograph, they released a sketch. It's a white male between 5 feet 6 inches and 5 feet 10 inches. He had reddish brown hair and was estimated to weigh around 220 pounds. Now, we're going to talk about a possible suspect in this case, but it's kind of mixed in with a different case. So I'm going to give you guys the details on this other case, and then we'll go back to the suspect involved. Tim Watkins was a bicyclist that went missing around the same time a bunch of people had been claiming to see a man on these trails threatening people with a hatchet. So when he went missing, a couple of friends decided to go and look for him, and while they were out searching for him, they noticed a suspicious car pass by a couple of times, and it was enough to alert them, and they took down the make, model, and license plate of the vehicle and reported it as suspicious. Later, Tim's body was found in a way that appeared to be homicide. He had been shot multiple times. One of his shoes and his bike were found scattered a good distance away from where his body was found, and he was partially buried under a pile of leaves and twigs. That would obviously lead us to believe that somebody at least attempted to cover this up. They were investigating this as a homicide, but police did say that this was a popular area for target shooters, so it's not impossible that this would have been an accident. But again, he was shot multiple times, not just once, and was partially buried, so everything surrounding this looks to be as if it was a homicide. Later, police spotted a vehicle, I believe, pulling out of a thrift store that matched the description and license plate to the vehicle that Tim's friends had reported earlier. So they pulled the vehicle over, and when they went up to the window. They found out that the driver was Daniel Nations, and in the back of the vehicle they found a hatchet and a gun that matched the type of weapon that killed Tim. So they took Nations to a Colorado jail, and shortly after that people started noticing that he looked eerily similar to the sketch that had been drawn up of the man on the bridge the day that Libby and Abby went missing. I've heard that the Colorado and Indiana police departments got in contact about the arrest made on Daniel Nations, and Indiana Police Department asked them to release no information on this man or anything that they had found because there were similarities in the murder of Tim Watkins and Abby and Libby, and they are just trying to keep their investigation as tight-knit as possible, so they didn't want anything released to the public. Back to Daniel Nations, things started to get even weirder. His wife, Caitlin, and I am just going to mention that from what I know, this can no longer be proven. Her Facebook was deactivated, but this did go around, and anything that I hear on this case, everybody seems to know about this, so I'm just going to share it, assuming that this is true, but I just wanted to put it out there. But she did post on Facebook. She had said that she was his wife, but she wouldn't be for much longer, which possibly indicates that she was planning to get a divorce. She states that she is completely disgusted in the murders and everything that's happening, and she addresses the fact that people are asking her the big question of, is her husband involved? Did she know anything about this? Does she know what happened? She explains that she has no idea and that her husband never mentioned anything, but she goes on to say that she's really disgusted in his actions and how he's treating her. And this made a lot of people suspicious. I mean, if you're going around after something like this happens and expressing your disgust for your husband, it could mean that she is suspicious, or, I mean, I didn't read that much into it because she says that she is disgusted with the way that he's treating her, so that could be a very personal issue, but to make it publicly and to make it in the same post talking about this specific thing, it just led a lot of people to be suspicious and think that maybe the accusations against him weren't too far off. I also watched an interview with the wife where she spoke to a news outlet, and she stated that on the 13th, the day that the girls went missing, she had an ultrasound appointment, I think is what she said, and she said that she couldn't remember if he went with her. She thinks that he went with her, but she couldn't say for sure, and that is so bizarre to me. You don't remember if your husband went with you to an ultrasound, like, I don't know, but that's gonna be linked below. But she does go on to say that the next day he had to check in with the police department, and she was the one that drove him, so she knows for a fact that he was there. From what I've heard, he did check in with the police department that day, the 14th, the day that the girls' bodies were found. She does confront the fact that the sketch looks similar to her husband. She says she can see similarities, but she says that the photo of the man on the bridge doesn't match, and, hold on, I'm just gonna quote, it's not something her husband would wear. She doesn't mention his size or any possible, like, actual features that you can see on this man. She just thinks that it's not something that he would wear, and granted, she would probably know what he owns, but if he's going there for a specific reason, and clearly we don't have answers on this. So whoever this man was knew how to cover his tracks, and if you look back at the photo, this man has his hands in his pockets. My first impression was that he was holding like a gun or a knife or some sort of something, some weapon in his pockets, and he is looking down. He's even wearing a hat to like more cover his face. He's completely covered in clothing, like there's not exposed tattoos or nothing that could pinpoint this man. So to not acknowledge any other thing, just the fact that it doesn't look like something he would wear, it's not too far off to assume that this man could have gotten this outfit to throw somebody off in that way, or just to have disposable clothes, could have taken whatever it was that he could find and just had something to get rid of after the crime was committed. I'm not doubting that she's right that this might not be something her husband would wear, but I don't think that that necessarily stops this from being him, because getting clothes that aren't yours for a reason as disgusting as this would make absolute sense if you are trying to cover your tracks. So, I don't know, that's just speculation. At this point, people had started coming forward saying that they were threatened by Daniel with the hatchet, and people from his past had also started coming forward and trying to explain that he had been known to have a lot of anger and rage issues. And we run into a lot of false tips when it comes to cases like this. So a big question is, are these people who are saying that they were threatened by him just people who wanted to insert themselves into the case and be a part of it and get attention, information? I don't know. I'm sure that with the evidence that they found against him, and with multiple people saying that they had been threatened before they even knew who was being accused of doing it, I'm sure a lot of that is legitimate. Daniel Nations needed to check in with the police department. He does have a pretty lengthy criminal record, and this is not only why he needs to check in with the police department, but also why police think that he is potentially involved in this case. So he is a registered sex offender, and from what I've heard, he has exposed himself to people on more than one occasion. As of a few months ago, he was being charged for assault and trespassing. He apparently got into someone's vehicle to then assault them, and he also has a few failure to appear charges. That's a pretty lengthy list, as is, not including anything that he is being accused of as far as these 3 murders go and if he is actually involved in them. So as discovered by Lorden Arts, who is another YouTuber who does videos similar to this, these case mystery videos, he actually discovered that the last known address for Daniel Nations was only about 100 miles away from Delphi. As of October 2nd, 2017, after Indiana police had gone to Colorado to compare notes about the cases and possibly question Daniel Nations, they said that there was no information including or excluding him from the case of Abby and Libby. But they did state that they were still looking into information for this case, so it could just be another instance of them not wanting to release too much without really knowing, and maybe there's some other suspicions that they had possibly about him that they were still looking into, and it just wasn't substantial enough that they felt the need to release it to the public. Now, I've already mentioned these facts, but since we know that Daniel is a registered sex offender, that's why he had to check in with the police department. I have seen that during this time he was actually homeless, which is why the police couldn't check in with him because they didn't have an address for him, so that's why he had to go to them. So he checked in on the 14th, and he checked in the week before the girls went missing on the 7th, the week after he didn't check in. So he checked in on the 7th and then again on the 14th, and the week after he didn't show up. So obviously this is a little suspicious and could potentially put him there at the time of the murders, but in all reality, we don't know where he came from when he went to check in with the police department, so we wouldn't be able to say anything for sure. It's just with everything surrounding, he was in the area at the time, his last known address was close-ish to the area. People have claimed to have been threatened by him, he had rage issues, he had criminal history, his car was spotted, and when they found him, there was the hatchet and the gun. And from what I've seen, he didn't have an alibi for the day that the girls went missing, although police have said that they didn't find anything that necessarily made him a part of this case either. So I would assume that they would have covered their tracks as far as alibi goes. I just haven't seen any information on that. So again, we don't know, but this is just a list that is stacking up against him in this case. Now, I'd like to mention that the Snapchat photo that Libby posted to her Snapchat was the last time that the girls were seen. Their phones were pinged in that area of where they were last seen, but shortly after they were reported missing, their phones had shut off. People have speculated that maybe their phones had just died, but I don't think that that's likely, that both of their phones had died around the same exact time, especially when they knew they were coming here. I mean, they're teenage girls with cell phones. First of all, that's a form of entertainment, but also a form of safety, so I don't see that they would go there with phones that would die within that 3-hour time period. And now that we know that they had gone missing during that time period, it's unlikely that they were using it the whole time. This information has not been confirmed, but I would assume that the police do physically have the phones. Otherwise, I'm not sure how they would have gotten the video that Libby had taken or any other information. But that leaves between about 2 p.m. when the girls were last seen from the Snapchat photo to about 5:30 p.m. when they were reported missing for something to go wrong. That is a long time. So this just raises more questions. Were they kept alive for that period of time, or was the crime committed and this person stayed behind afterward? Because the phones weren't shut off until shortly after they were reported missing. So that means obviously somebody had turned off the phones. So that just raises a whole bunch of questions about what was happening during this period of time. A huge question for me is, how long is the recording that Libby had taken? I'm really confused by this, because if she had been scared and pulled out her phone to record, that was a smart thing to do, but I don't think that if the killer had noticed that she was recording, they would have just left the recording on the phone for police to see, and they obviously found it. So I'm just wondering when it stops, because obviously we know something horrific happened to these girls. I don't feel comfortable being the person to ask the question, but is the evidence of this thing happening on the recording? And I know that is a horrible thing to think about, but if that's the case, I can only wonder what kind of evidence, or if there's more than what they shared with the public, more clips of voices, of people talking, of anything else that could have been released. And I know that they didn't want to release a lot. You have to kind of trust the system that they would release anything that would help the public identify somebody. But at the same time, if it's something that horrific, they wouldn't want it released. That's too personal. I don't think that they would release something to that extent. I just feel really uncomfortable being the person to bring this up, but it does raise that question, because the only other thing is that she stopped recording, which I don't see happening, first of all because she felt the need to record in the first place, but also because if they were approached, she would have been a little distracted. I don't think she would have thought about stopping the recording, and if she did, I don't think that she would have actually done it, because you want to keep recording something like this for your own safety, and I feel like that's why she pulled out the phone in the first place. Another option is that she was caught and forced to stop recording, but if that was the case, again, how did they get the recording? Or the other option is that the phone ran out of space and stopped recording on its own. It didn't die until shortly after they were reported missing, so it's unlikely that it died from recording before things happened. So one of those three things happened, or the fourth and most horrible possibility is that the phone kept recording throughout everything that happened. And again, if that's the case, that makes me like sick to my stomach to think about the fact that it's possible that they could have something like that in this case and can't or won't or not comfortable releasing something like that to the public for completely understandable reasons. But there could be something useful in a video if it went to that length, and I feel like most phones would have just run out of space at that point. That's just a question that's raised in my mind as to what else, because either way we know that the video is longer because they only released that small portion of the audio clip, and so it makes it hard for people in the area because they aren't able to answer any more questions because they just don't have any more to go off of. As we know, this is a very small town. There's a lot of forest land and trails and a big lake in that area. I feel like it's just a lot of woods and forest, and you would need to know your way around that to know where the most popular trails are, or if you're going to go off the trails, you need to know exactly how far to get away from the trails to make sure that nobody can see or hear you, because as far as we know, there are no witnesses. So I feel like it would have needed to be somebody who was from the area, or at the very least had spent a good amount of time learning this area in order to know where they needed to go to make this happen so that they didn't get caught. That's another thing, like, people were there. People had claimed to see the man on the bridge that was in the photo, and yet they didn't notice anything suspicious from him, from the girls, but there were people there, there were people around. So to have nobody who saw anything or heard anything is so bizarre to me. I just feel like there's no way around it. You would have had to be familiar in order to get to the place where you knew nobody would. And I guess it's a possibility that maybe they didn't know, that it was just a risk they were willing to take. That's just crazy to me that there were so many people who were there and were willing to come forward and say they saw this person, and yet nothing came of that. And on top of that, if the Tim Watkins murder was related to the Delphi murders, that's 3 people, and 2 of them at the same time. So if these were all committed by the same person, that just leads me to believe even more that this would need to be somebody familiar with this area. But before we get into the theories, I just wanted to quickly throw in here that when I was looking for updates, because a lot of this information is from a couple of months ago, and I tried to find the most recent information, and as far as I found, there's really no updates other than the police have said at this point Daniel Nations is not somebody that they really care about as far as this case goes. We don't have a lot of the information that police have, so we have to trust that if they are saying that Daniel Nations is not somebody that they're looking into at this point, that it's likely he's not involved. At the least, I feel he's gotta be connected to the Tim Watkins murder, but they don't think that he's necessarily connected to Libby and Abby, and I haven't heard if he was actually convicted of anything, so if anybody knows, feel free to let me know because I haven't seen that anywhere. I just wanted to throw it in there because we talked a lot about him and a lot about his past and the suspicions everybody has against him, but it's important that we don't accuse an innocent man of something he didn't do. As far as I know, they still believe that the man on the bridge is involved in this and is a suspect, but if they don't believe that Daniel Nations is involved, then even though they look insanely similar, then that must mean that they believe that it's 2 different people. So we're going to quickly jump into the theories, and I don't think for this case there's a lot of theories that you wouldn't have already pieced together from the information given on this case. There's not a lot of unexpected theories. So theories go, was it someone that the girls knew and that's why nobody heard any screams or saw anything alarming? If they believe that the man on the bridge was involved, then I feel that it's unlikely that it was somebody they knew because nobody else recognized him, and it's, again, a very small town. Another thing is, if it was somebody they knew, why would they have been alarmed to start recording in the first place? Unless, I mean, as we can hear from the audio, he says down the hill, so maybe it was somebody they knew, but they were acting very off and in a way that did scare them. Of course, it's always a possibility that one of these girls was the target and the other one was collateral, but it seems more that they were victims of opportunity. It doesn't seem like there's any reason that these girls would have been targeted on purpose. The last theory is that the man whose property they were found on, Ronald Logan, was involved, and I think I mentioned this earlier, but a lot of people kind of think that he was a little older or a little unhealthier and wouldn't have had the stamina to keep up with these girls, 2 young girls, not just one, but 2 of them. And I mean, if you scared them enough with a weapon or whatever it was that you had, it's possible that it could have been him, but if you were the one doing this, I don't see why you would let them be found on your property or even near your property. To be frank, it's a dumb mistake to make, and I don't feel like after going through the trouble of trying to make sure that you covered your tracks, because obviously we don't have a lot else to go off of, at least not anything that the police have released. I don't think that's a mistake that he would make. So personally, I don't think that he's involved, but it has been brought up. And it should also be stated, if I didn't already say this, that he was actually arrested, but for an unrelated charge. I think he violated his parole and had gotten some DUIs or something along the line of that, but nothing even relating to this case at all. And also with Ronald Logan, a lot of people say that his voice doesn't match the voice on the recording, but it's possible to talk different. So I mean, overall, I don't really feel like he was involved, but just looking at that evidence, I mean, you can talk different anytime you want. I don't know, I don't feel like that would make a lot of sense. This just leads to more questions, like, was there more people involved in this? Why did they feel spooked? Why are there no witnesses? Nobody heard or saw anything. Why don't they think Daniel Nations was involved? And why do they think the man on the bridge was involved? What other evidence do they have? This case just leads to all sorts of questions. I really, really hope that everybody involved in this case gets closure, and that goes for Tim Watkins as well. I feel like this is such a recent case and they have quite a bit of information and possible suspects. I feel like this case will get solved at some point. They're still taking tips, and they have a couple of different contact numbers as well as an email, I believe, so I will link all of that in the description. On that note, I'm just going to close out because my camera's really going to die, so I'm sorry. I usually end these videos better. Let me know what you guys think about this case. If you want to follow me on social media, that will be in the description as well. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me. You can also turn on my notifications. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye guys!